Hello, everyone, and welcome to That's a Food Job. We have hit 100 episodes of the FoodGrads Podcast, and we are celebrating by bringing you a new podcast. So do not worry, we are FoodGrads Podcast, but we're looking differently. So as you can still recognize from my voice, I'm still Veronica, and today's episode is going to act as a celebration episode, and we really hope that you stick around and you join us in celebrating, and it's because of listeners like you that we're able to get to here. So thank you for sticking it out with us. As always, my name is Veronica Hislop, and I am a content creator with FoodGrads, and I also host or formerly hosted the FoodGrads Podcast, but also I am a PhD at TMU University, which is the Toronto Metropolitan University. I study food science, and today I am joined with Nicole Gallace, who is our Talent Solutions Manager for the Talent Solutions Group. And I'm also joined with Sydney Mohr, who is our Digital Communications and Event Coordinator. Those titles mean a lot of things, and that's kind of why our podcast exists. So why don't we go around the table, and I'll let you two introduce yourself. Maybe we'll start with Sydney.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Veronica said, I'm the Digital Communications and Events Coordinator here at FoodGrads. I actually started my co-op with FoodGrads about 3 years ago, and then I did my second co-op here, and then I've just sort of stuck around. So now I help post on social media and create content for there. I write articles, and I also help work with the Careers Now team and FoodGrads to help run and set up the back end of our virtual career fairs. So, yeah.
Hi, everyone. So my name again, Nicole Gallace. I am a Talent Solutions Manager with FoodGrads and DeLacy Executive. So I spend my days working with students and grads and leading the FoodGrads brand, as well as search projects through our DeLacy brand for companies in the food and beverage processing space. So I get to work with new grads as well as people that are more seasoned in their career. So get to see it all. And I am the founder of FoodGrads, which we started back in 2016. And I couldn't be prouder of the work that we've done. And Veronica, you've been with me since then, early days. So we've done a lot. We've got a lot accomplished, and I've been with this new Talent Solutions Group for the last 3 years, and we're growing and growing and getting stronger and stronger in the things that we're doing. So I'm really excited about being on this episode today.
Yeah, it's really a reflection, or feels like we're doing the first episode again, where we're recording number one. And Sydney, you sound like me, where you're like, I didn't leave. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like me for a while.
We won't let you go.
Well, I figured we would dive in before we talk about the rebrand. We would take a look back, and I want to start off by asking you both on how FoodGrads began, and kind of started looking at how we started this podcast.
You want me to go ahead first?
I think if we're doing overall FoodGrads, I mean, you have to speak to that, and then I'll go into the podcast.
Yeah.
Sounds good. It was an amalgamation of different reasons that I thought FoodGrads should exist in the world. One thing, as a recruiter in the industry, I definitely saw that there was a need to attract young people into the industry. And not long after I started the platform back in 2016, there were other government-funded initiatives that came to light that sort of had done the research to show that my theories and thoughts, without the data to back it up per se, was correct. So, we started the platform really as an opportunity to celebrate the people and professions in the industry. When I would interview people that had been in the industry a long time, they always sort of zigged and zagged and ended up in food, but it wasn't a conscious decision. And I wondered why that was, and definitely felt that there wasn't enough discussion about the food and beverage processing sector at the school or high school level or secondary level, so or post-secondary. So definitely saw a need for FoodGrads. And then from a personal perspective, my mother-in-law had been diagnosed with cancer, and one of the things that really came to light was how important food was and how food keeps us healthy. I mean, we all know that, but then until somebody that you love gets sick and you see things up close and personal, it really struck me how important our diet is and how much work there is to do in the food industry. And really, you can have advocates saying, we need better, food companies, big food is terrible, blah, blah, all this noise. But I truly believe the change will happen with the people in the industry at the grassroots level. So again, FoodGrads was designed really to attract socially conscious, bright, intelligent people to this industry, because we need you to change the food system, whether it's nutrition, whether it's food safety, food waste. There's so many environmental issues. There are so many good things that need to be done, and we need people to do it. So over to you, Veronica, where you kind of came into things.
I mean, I got involved with FoodGrads. Do I want to recash my whole story, how I got into food? That is the question. You can listen to episode 10 if you wanted the full thing. But essentially, I went to school with a chemistry degree, and I originally had wanted to go into food science, and I didn't get accepted into like any of the programs, which was really shocking to me considering what we just talked about, that there was a need for it. So I don't know. I got really unlucky that year, but maybe that was a good thing, because maybe this would have never all happened had I not. So I was in my second year, and I was looking for anything I could put on my resume to like be food. And that's how I saw Campus Ambassador. Nicole had like a little job posting on the website, and I got involved. And by some amazing feat as well, we happen to live quite close by. So I think that really helped start the foundation. And what we realized was that not only are people not going into the jobs, it's probably because they don't even know that they exist. Like, I think that was a big thing. Like, I knew that product development existed because I watched Rags to Riches, which is this Canadian program that showed home cooks that could like put a recipe in, and they would go through the product development process. So I was like, whoa, this exists. And I watched Alton Brown. And so I was like, okay, I need to get anything I can do on my resume to make me get into the job. And as we know now, you can have a chemistry degree, no problem, and go in the food industry. So I got involved with FoodGrads as a campus ambassador back in my second year. I did some co-op positions in food, and I just stuck with it. I really enjoyed working with Nicole. She's a great person to be around. She's really motivational and just kind of let me do what I want, but in a very positive way. And so I blogged with FoodGrads, and then when I graduated, I worked for a full year, and then I decided to come back and do research. So I did I started doing my master's, and then I transferred to PhD. But during the beginning of my master's, that is when COVID happened. And that was a very interesting time as a graduate student. So a lot of podcasts started at that time, but many did not continue on. So we're great that we can actually keep going. So the podcast came as more of an extension of the jobs not existing. So it's like, okay, we have some job postings, but like, I can't find a single conversation about a plant manager. Like, how would I even know that I want to be one if I don't know it exists? So that's really where the podcast came. It was a way to connect with others during COVID, a way to connect with students, to hear more, but as well, just like for me to learn more, because there's so many cool people who are doing really cool stuff. And I know we'll talk more about the different like people and like some of my favorite episodes, but really the podcast just came because we wanted to talk to people and find out what they do. And that was I think it was 4 years ago. So like this podcast has followed along with my graduate journey, so that's been pretty exciting.
Well, we're so glad that Nicole, you started FoodGrads, and then from there we created the FoodGrads podcast.
Yeah, it's been a really good time, and I'm so happy like Nicole gave the support, and as well like Careers Now has also been really good in supporting the podcast, and it's thanks to like our sponsors. Yes, I have to say that make the podcast possible, but of course like people listening.
Absolutely, 100%. We can't keep going unless we have companies and associations that are stakeholders in the industry supporting us. So and it's so important, like you said, Veronica, to have the voices of the industry and the storytelling, because people there's a lot of negative perceptions out there about the food and beverage processing sector. And when you hear from the people in the industry and you just hear how passionate they are and how much they love their job and the good that they're doing, it totally changes your opinion on what's going on behind the curtain, these food companies. So well done you, and well done Sid. You've become an integral part of our team as well. So
absolutely.
Well, now I think we should talk about the big new topic that goes along with the 100th episode, the rebrand. So I don't know, Veronica, if you kind of want to touch on why we're doing this rebrand, all the exciting new stuff that comes with it, and what has changed.
Yeah, Sydney, I'm really excited about the rebrand. it was kind of needed. Like, okay, so like Nicole and I talked about, the podcast started a long time ago. As I talked about, I'm a chemistry student. I'm not a graphic designer by any means. And when coming up with the podcast, we were so focused on the guests and like getting great interviews and connecting that I feel like we didn't really know what to call the podcast. And we were like, well, we're food grads. So there we go. We're the FoodGrads Podcast. And, it did do its job for what it was. I mean, it was a podcast by food grads, but there was a lot of confusion after as well. Is it called the FoodGrads Podcast, or is it FoodGrads Podcast? Like, it was just all these different things. And with the logo, it was me doing it in Canva. And everyone, I think you've learned I'm not a graphics designer. I can do video, but graphics, not my forte. So this rebrand was a way, first of all, to give like a fresh, be more clear about what this podcast is for those who might be new, because we've been really fortunate that this podcast has been able to even be, featured in some high schools. Some classes have done it, and it would be really good when you hear FoodGrads Podcast. It's not as clear, so we really wanted to like celebrate that. We're interviewing those with food jobs, food careers, like things that they have chosen, and we want to show that that's a food job. Like, there's so many different things that can touch upon it, like communications jobs, digital marketing, plant management, food safety, AI. Like, there's all these things that you wouldn't think could be a food job, and that's what we really wanted to show. So with our rebrand, we wanted to go new name, make it really clear that's a food job, but we also wanted to have fun with the graphics as well. And it's another testament that our team has grown since the beginning of the podcast. When, again, graphic designer me, not. And we have some amazing co-op students that are a part of our team. And I really have to shout out Kat, but particularly Alyssa, who designed our logo. So what are we looking at with our new logo? Well, it's we're trying to do for this like retro nouveau feel, where it kind of reflects that foods have changed over time, but at the same time they can have memories, there's nostalgia, but then we also have innovation going on. So our logo is meant to show like a sticker and like you'd find on like a package or a fruit, because when we think of food jobs, going back to, that was another big thing even with food grads, is many people didn't even know what a food job was. Like, they don't even know what food processing is, let alone a job in it. And like, we still get it when Nicole and I and Sydney, we go to these events and we ask like, have you heard of the food industry? And they're like, yeah, chef and farmer. And I'm like, that's true, but
there's a lot else going on.
yeah, it's really confusing for a lot of people. So we wanted to really highlight that like packaged goods section, go in the supermarket with the new logo. And Alyssa had this great idea to put a barcode, because barcodes are like indicative of packaged goods. And it's really cool if you actually scan this, it should go to the FoodGrads website, which is pretty cool as well. We want to show new and old people can be in any stage of their career. It's with the graphics side. And we also have a new mascot, which is really cool. We don't have a name. We've had Quentin on our website, and shout out to Quentin, but we don't have a name yet for our new guy. So we'll have to be on the lookout.
And to jump on that, I like the fact that we are taking into account that you just hit the nail on the head. People don't understand food processing. It almost, from a broader perspective, comes with a dirty connotation to it, or something, that it's processed. But bananas are processed, fruit is processed. It's that dispelling myths in the industry. Hearing from people, I know one of the posts that we shared on our blog went viral, like, I'm a food scientist, I'm not trying to kill you, kind of thing. It's amazing what people are doing in the industry to keep your food healthy. Our food safety people are heroes. They make it so that you can go to the grocery store and confidently buy food and not get sick. There's so much more to learn. I learn every day, and I think, Veronica, you've done an amazing job bringing these conversations to life, and I love the rebrand. I can't wait to see the animation come to life and all the sharing of it on our socials.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like the graphics look amazing, and there'll be a little touches, and I'd like to think as well, it's like a fresh start for me as well to be like, I've grown since the beginning, and of course it's always gradual, and I'll continue to grow. But I think that this will be a good way to just, come out there and say like we're food grads. We're in like a new time, like a new. I've changed a lot since the student type since the beginning. And I think this rebrand's just really us as well celebrating the industry and showing like, look at all the food jobs, because there's probably a lot of food jobs that didn't exist when we started even the podcast. You'd be surprised.
Mm-hmm. I think timing is everything. I mean, big picture, it's like the entrepreneurial side of me is like, I want everything straight away. We started FoodGrads, and I know that, you have all these ideas and these concepts that you want to see come to fruition, but as time goes on, you realize there is a time for everything, and everything does happen for a reason when it's meant to happen with the right team around you. I really, truly believe in that. And so to your point with the graphics, it's given our co-op students an amazing opportunity to do a rebrand. They've done the research, the information that they brought to us as to why they chose color and texture of the images. And it's just fascinating, and it's just cool to sit back and hear them go through their process, and it supports our process and what we're trying to achieve as goals as a business, but also as this project that a lot of podcasts fizzle out at 11 episodes. I heard this stat recently that everyone has a podcast, everyone's starting a podcast, but they're really freaking hard, right, Veronica? Like, to keep going.
Especially an interview podcast, like you got to get the guest, you have to talk with the guest, coordinate, edit. Is a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, and you've pretty much stick handled that, for a long time, and it's amazing what you've done. And I think as well, you can start to get frustrated or disheartened, like, who's listening to this? Does anyone care? But now we are hearing from people saying, I listen to your podcast. I love your podcast. It's great. And so it's like, all that hard work, but it does take time.
Mm-hmm. And as well, even another thing with the rebrand is going to video. Like, we only recently went into video because I didn't want to do video. I'll admit, I'm just like, isn't my voice enough? Like, I already edit my voice. Do I really have to see my face now too? Like, did I look like that? But you get used to it. It's practice.
Yeah, I'm personally very excited about the rebrand. I think it's the perfect celebration for the 100th episode. Just a fresh new start to just grow and get bigger, and I'm very excited about it.
I want to thank you for all your help with the campaign, the marketing campaign. You're leading that for us as a business and getting things out there and letting the audience know what the changes are and celebrating that online with us. And we're going to be at University of Guelph on October 2nd, which will be fun. So, when the episode is celebrated ultimately. So lots of good stuff to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Sydney. Like, I mean, we talk about just editing the podcast, but actually getting it out and marketing it. Like, podcasts, I think people have heard, are like one of the notoriously harder things to market because it's a lot of times audio only. So to have like support as well, like another reason why it wouldn't have got through 100 episodes if it wasn't for the support of marketing and you promoting it. So I appreciate that a lot.
It's a great podcast, and honestly, it's my favorite part of the marketing that I do at FoodGrads, because it just, Veronica, you do such a good job with it, and I just want everyone to hear and listen, because I'll say personally for myself, I was not part of the food industry before I got this co-op and this job, and Veronica, you've taught me a lot about the food industry, and Nicole, everything, and it's a really exciting industry, food and beverage, and there's so much to learn. So it's very exciting getting the podcast out there and watching the audience listen and learn more, just like I am too. So yeah.
And the industry, it's not going anywhere. This is what we say to students. We're always going to need food, so it's a good place. Whether you're in marketing like you were, or events, PR like your background, Sydney, or whether you're in sales, whether you're in HR, like regardless of your education and interests, this industry is going to be around forever.
Yeah, there's a lot of food jobs, and we want to also promote and celebrate that people are in these jobs. Like, that's a food job. Like, I am a food grad, I have a food job, and like be really proud about it and own it, because even like manufacturing is not thought of very well. But like, man, I've learned that like the skills needed for these jobs are insane. There's so many different walks of life. You can make really good money. That actually surprised me. I'm not even gonna lie. And I don't know why that surprises me, but again, like the information isn't really out there, and there's so many people doing cool things. Like, a company needs more like sustainability initiatives, it might do that, and you need like fresh faces to come in. And just because your company might not be a sustainability, like an organic type company, that doesn't mean that it doesn't need the people to help make it more sustainable, to source better ingredients, to make it fair trade. Like, there's all these opportunities that traditionally I don't think people would have thought of. So
yeah, our mentorship session last Friday was all based on food waste, and we had a great speaker from Dole Packaged Foods talking about, you can personally brand yourself as a sustainability person at your organization, even if they don't have those initiatives. And it's so important to make yourself stand out, and especially if you care about this stuff, it means you get up in the morning and you're passionate about what you're doing. It gets you out of bed, even on the tough days when you're feeling unmotivated, which we all have those days. People are lying if they say that they love their job every single day. There's always some days where you're just like, oh, but if you're doing it for a bigger purpose and there's a bigger plan, and you're helping others, I think it's amazing what you can do in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the rebrand. Like, I think great interviews to come. I'm hoping another 100 episodes, and then we'll get you, Nicole, on for the 51, and Sydney will get you on, and then maybe it'll be our tradition. So that sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lots of exciting things to come. Okay, well, now in celebration of the 100th episode, I think we should take some time to look back at some older clips of the podcast to see how we've grown, look at some past guests.
We'll load this up on the screen.
And as long as you always have passion, opportunity, you will find success and fulfillment.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the FoodGrads Podcast. Today on the show, we have Joe Baker, OTEC's Systems, Leadership, and Integrated Strategy Advisor. Joe and I also talk about COVID's evolving role in changing the landscape of the restaurant and hospitality industry, and how through these difficult times comes the chance for a positive change to create a more inclusive, resilient workforce. The first step is just to take a step back, breathe, and reflect. So I hope you enjoy the show. So for those listening, I did cut it out a little bit because that was a 2-minute introduction. In the podcasting world, that is a really long introduction. I didn't realize how long that was at the beginning. I mean, it gave you all the information, but wow.
It is an art form doing this stuff, and we all beat ourselves up, but I think from the start you've done amazing. But I would say you've improved over time as a host, and just with confidence and as you've learned. But I don't know anybody, as I say, that likes hearing themselves, won't critique themselves, or why did I say that, or do I sound like that?
But Joe was actually, even though this was episode 2, Joe was actually my second guest after, I guess third if we count you, Nicole, but you're a friend, so you're not really a guest.
I'm not a real one.
So Joe was I've met him a few times, so to have I think that was a really special moment. And as well, I'll share the clip about Sean. How did you even get Sean on the show, Nicole? Like, I don't think he was in our circle. Like, for me, for someone to interview, oh wow, that's unlocking another memory as well. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but with Sean, my first interview guest, so I did it over Skype. Zoom wasn't even a mainstream yet. This was a little, I don't even know. I was trying to figure out how to do a phone call over Skype and record it through it, and it was very complicated. But yeah, no, Sean, how did you get in touch with Sean? Do you remember, Nicole?
I know that I'm very active on LinkedIn, and anybody that I respect and I think is doing good things in the industry, and I think would be, a good conversation, a good discussion, I reached out, and that's still back then what I did, and when I brought guests over to you, but also what I do today. I'll literally be there scrolling on the weekend and be like, oh, we need them on the podcast, and just reach out. And it's amazing how most people, I would say 99% of people I've reached out to just say sure, because as soon as you mention influencing and inspiring the next generation, this industry is so nurturing and is just full of good people, and they want to pay it forward. So that I don't get many no's. There might be not next week, I'm busy, but not many no's.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. I've really learned a lot in terms of making an introduction. It's surprisingly harder than it seems. Yes, you can. I don't know. There's some people who are able to do it that are really lucky, like Tim Ferriss, because he started so early with podcasting, he's able to have these like massively long introductions. And I think it's great to have like 2-hour conversations, but I think for most people, that's a little much to listen to. There was a podcast recently with Elon Musk that I think was 6 hours. I am not bringing you a 6-hour podcast ever. I will say that.
I think your audience. Like, I think half an hour, 45 minutes, hour max. And we know our audience. That's where their comfort zone is. That's what they want to dedicate to this, and then time to move on.
Well, let's bring up the second one, because I've had 3 iterations of the introduction. So let's see with the next one. Welcome to episode 53 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Francisco Pergola, co-founder and CEO of Chetties. Chetties are a high-protein, low-sugar cracker made with no artificial ingredients or preservatives that are light, crispy, cheesy, made with real cheddar cheese, and of course, delicious. On this week's episode, Francisco and I talked about the story of Chetties and how his brother, Tomas, and him founded it. I can't wait to share this conversation with you. So enough with that introduction. Let's get on with the show. Yeah, that was the second one. I kind of was going for this like groovy theme. I don't know. But as you can hear, my audio, I've been maybe not the best clip to show, but that has been one thing I've learned a lot through this process is audio editing. That is something I never would have thought about. I've gone through like Audacity. I went to Descript. I moved back to Audacity. Learning about other programs, recording through Zoom, what's a better quality, WAV files. Like, I never planned to learn any of this, but it kind of just happened.
And you're good at it. It's, it has just got better and better. And I think, your dedication to it, because you could have just stuck with what you knew. And I don't think anyone grows professionally, personally when you do that. So again, kudos to you for keep working at it to improve it, right?
Yeah, it's because it's such an interest, especially with an interview podcast like this. Like, to me, these people are amazing. Francisco was amazing to talk to, but we're not as likely to like have those celebrity names. Like when you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, like most people don't even need an introduction. Like they know who they are, but like it's hard with an introduction to write something that not only speaks to who the person is, what the episode's about, and their job. Like there's so much into that to do. Like it's hard. I'll admit it's a little hard to like craft an introduction that like encapsulates the person, talks about what they do, and then what's going to come in the episode. Because like that's what I've been told. Like you gotta have a hook. You have to have hold on, it's a hook, who they're like what's the audience member going to get out of this episode, and how do you highlight the person. And like to do, I don't know, some people do it in like 30 seconds. I'm like, that's
yeah. Well, and I think we've talked about this in the past. Who are the famous food, in this industry? Who are the creme de la creme at the top? That it's very challenging to find those superstars in this industry. I mean, I think we talked about it in the past when we were doing our focusing on blogs. I can think of one well-known movie where someone from the food industry is mentioned, and it's Clark Griswold, that he's a food scientist, right? Like that's probably the only movie I could think of where it's like, oh, he's a food scientist, he's making food, and it's a prominent movie and he's the main character. Well, in popular culture, no one talks about the food industry. They talk about chefs. The celebrity chef world is well covered, but food processing, not so much.
The tea industry is full of so many people that are passionate about giving you the best cup of tea. But what kind of jobs are out there? How do you break into this industry? And is having a love of tea enough?
The world doesn't need more tea geeks. It needs people who understand the business of tea.
That's William Dietz, aka Billy, author of the book Spill the Tea. Billy has been in love with the tea industry since he first learned about the health benefits of tea back in high school.
You can decide to brew your straight tea or blended tea however you want, as much water, whatever temperature, cold, hot. Like the customization, I think from the user perspective, abounds in tea, and that's really one big differentiator.
So in this episode, you'll learn from Billy's career journey into the tea industry, the differences between blended and single origin teas as outlined in his book, Spill the Tea, and advice for those looking to go into the tea industry. I'm your host, Veronica, and here at FoodGrads, we're here to remind you that there's always something for everyone in food and will help you find it.
You did such a good job of marrying how people need to receive information as well, because not everybody wants to hear. They like the visual aspect as well. And so, it's so good.
This is when I really realized that my place is not a good place to film, like my actual condo. I try, I'm living that Canadian life right now as a young adult, and I love my space. But, I realized like going from audio to video, I was like, I don't have an office room that I can just like open up for somebody. And like that one is like in my front hallway that I'm trying not to show all my like anime figures and like all those types of things. And I know like maybe people would be okay with it, but I don't know. It's a little personal, kind of sharing my space with everyone. So
no, I think it's amazing. And you must have loved that episode with your own personal interest in and love for tea.
Yes. Oh, when I spoke to Billy, like I got him on the show because he had a book that he had published, and I bought the book and I was like, this is great. And he's Canadian and I love tea. I got my tea right here. I've actually had most likely many of his products. He didn't specify which ones, but I'm like 100% I would have had to try something with him. So yeah, switching to video, that was stressful. That took a lot of time to edit. And then I had to learn, my camera microphone's different than this microphone. And then trying to do video editing at the public library. Shout out to the library because you can rent out equipment. I didn't really come in planning that I was going to start filming. And as Sid and Nicole know, I'm kind of a little old school with a lot of things. Yes, I have my flip phone here. So I guess it's perfect with the new logo. But it's been really exciting to learn how to do video editing. I know my focus is always on the audio, though I do know a lot of people still listen to it. I still listen mostly audio podcasts, but so I want to make sure like both ends are there, because that drives me crazy when you're when you're listening to a podcast and there's been like no consideration for the audio only members, and it's just like, I don't know what's happening on screen. Tell me what's happening on screen.
Yeah. Remember that people are digesting this information in different ways, different mediums, and I think you've captured that for sure. Then.
Yeah, and even with this episode, and I don't have a video audio, the audio version introduction was different. So like that's where we started to go into like our like funky kind of future funk kind of time. So there's that, and then finally we're settling on this last one that we have here, which should have just released recently. Video editing takes a long time as well, everyone. So it's fun, but it takes time. So we moved over to our very last one.
And so, then it's like you get to your second year and your third years, typically that's when then you're going to be doing less class and more lab work, and then you're doing more so on your own.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FoodGrads Podcast with me, Veronica Hislop, and we have a fantastic guest for you today. We are speaking with AJ Taylor, a scientist at McCormick Fauna. So today we're going to talk about the process of getting into graduate school, what it's like actually being in graduate school, and that journey outwards of leaving the grad school life and getting a full-time job. AJ is an open book, and that makes it really easy to talk to him about his grad school experience, making it the perfect episode to listen to if you're thinking about grad school.
Yeah, so that is the most updated version that we're sitting at right now. So Yeah, again, editing takes a long time. So it's like finding that balance of what can we edit in a good amount of time to get these conversations out there because they're so great, but then also, make it eye-catching, all those types of things. And if we can even see with the video, I've even taken the time and like split it up where you have like the two sides, and then when our guest is talking, just like the one screen, because I don't know, I think it makes it more interesting. So yeah, this podcast is really about finding your own style. So
I honestly, I commend you for everything you've learned in doing this and being so open and honest. I hope anyone that's listening today that might want to start a podcast really sort of listens to the iterations that you've gone through and knows and doesn't beat themselves up, because I listen to some podcasts. I'm not a massive podcast listener, but I do enjoy a few. Obviously, this one, but for example, Diary of a CEO is one of my favorites. He has a team of 50 people for a podcast, and they look professional, amazing conversations, well marketed, all these things. And I think you're trying to compete with other podcasts out there. And to your point, Veronica, we're never going to have those big names per se, because that just doesn't exist in this industry necessarily. And we don't have a production team of 50 people. So, what you produce is amazing.
Yeah, it's all thanks to the team and just having the opportunity to grow and learn. Yeah, there's been a lot of bloopers in the background. And I mean, I know you're saying don't be hard on yourself, but oh yeah, I am every time. Every time I rewatch it, and I'm just like, but it is coming to learn to accept. And I guess this is like the advice for life and all that is just like, don't be a perfectionist. Like, just try to work on getting better the next time. Sometimes getting it out is more important. Like, at least I always try to make sure that the guests are like highlighted and celebrated. That's always my key. If I'm not, maybe it's putting myself down, but I just like, to me, it's so important to have them there. And I think it's okay to be critical of yourself to a degree, but also be like realistic with yourself. Like, is the criticism fair? Like, if you're not a pro guitar player, I mean, it's not good to pretend you're a pro guitar player, but at the same time, don't say like you're garbage. Like, you got to find a medium.
And the reason you beat yourself up, we all do in different ways, but especially with this, in this regard, is because you care, which I think you can't buy that. You can't reproduce that. You either care or you don't care. And I think you care so much about this industry. You wouldn't be doing your PhD in this space if you truly care about the content, about your guests, about making sure they are highlighted and they are put in the best light. And so, again, it's great work you're doing.
Yeah. And, this with the show, like, we've just had so many great guests. Like, I know we just showed off, here's me saying, oh, it's all about the guests. And I just showed off like all the progress, but it is our way of celebrating. This is our episode. But, I've had so many amazing guests from I'm looking at the list, and like every single conversation I could remember, and I could give you like a whole 10-minute synopsis on like why this person was great or like what they're doing is cool. But it's like hospitality, research and development, sales and marketing, entrepreneurship, production, supply chain operations, education, agriculture, consulting, like food safety, of course, like, which is one of my personal favorites. There's just, charity. Like, it's so much. And like, we've had everyone from a winery lab technician to, we had someone who worked at the CFIA, which is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. We've also had someone from the USDA, the United States equivalent of Canada.
And they came to us.
They
Asked us. Yeah, that was a great moment for them to actually say, we'd like to be on your podcast. I mean, that's when you know that it's going to be.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, I've enjoyed even consulting. Like, I didn't realize that was even a job. There was cheesemaker. Like, I'm just going through the list. I'm like 100 different, like, so many. And like, they're all doing so many cool things. Like Kim Shakal, she was the director of sales and marketing at Equifruit. And like, they're doing such a cool thing. So they weren't making a packaged product. So they were doing bananas, and they're making sure that they're fair trade. And like, for the cost of a consumer to eat like a banana that's more fair trade, it's like $5 extra per year. So it's like, why aren't we all doing this? Like, it's really cool. Or I got introduced to Rebecca Bradley, where she's a part of a startup that is turning brewers spent grain into bread. So, or like new bakery products that people can do. So it's like people are changing the world. Like it's so cool. Or another funny thing that happened, again, I'm like going through all the names and remembering, is someone that I interviewed on the podcast, Elizabeth Hagerman. She was a food scientist at the Whirl Corporation. Funny thing is that she started to work for Karen Aronia from the Hershey Company later on. So when she was doing like review for the podcast, she's like, wait, I know this person. I work with them. So it's just like funny how it goes to show, like with this industry, you never know where you're going to end up and like who you might know. Like 2 of our campus ambassadors just happen to, like, they never knew each other. And then one works for another. So it's kind of funny just how the world goes.
It's a small world. It's huge industry. It's also really small and everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I've had a lot of good episodes. I've learned a lot, you know, and some of it has also been like motivation for myself. Like even with the one I just showed you with AJ, he kind of gave me some inspiration to just keep going with my podcast, or not. Oh my God, not my podcast. That going, my PhD, because even that, like doing this, PhD can be really hard. Like sometimes it's like really frustrating, and you're just like, yeah, today's the day. I'm gonna quit. Just gonna go. I don't need a PhD. It's fine, but it's like no. It's like you're gonna get through it. So like hearing other people's stories, it's really inspiring, and it's been like a real growth for me to like be able to talk to people and like hear about their challenges, because I don't try to focus too much on it in the show, but I also do try to touch upon it a little bit, because you know we all go through challenges, and it's easy when you look at someone. Like even like Davis Yeager, like he was this really amazing food scientist. Like this guy looks like he was amazing. Like this guy has never done anything wrong. Like he just has it together. And he's like, yeah, I was almost a high school dropout. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I was in a lot of trouble. And I was like, how did you get here? Like you're amazing.
Yeah, storytelling is so important. Education and storytelling, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are some of like my favorite. I could talk about everyone. I think as well, I don't know why there's so many different conversations that stand out to me for different reasons. Like Jared Kligerman, he does like his own like consulting and all that. Follow him on LinkedIn. He's like doing some really amazing stuff, but like his energy was just amazing. Like I was like, I'm never going to do your job, but I just like hearing you talk. Some people are so passionate about what they do. And so I feel like those are some of my favorite episodes because they stand out, but like I can see there's so many. I could spend a whole podcast just talking about the other guests.
Well, we'll give a shout out to them when we share this recording. We'll definitely tag them, and hopefully they'll reshare with their network and help and get this new branded podcast in front of more people. That's the goal.
I think we should now dive into some of the behind the scenes questions that we've got for you, Veronica. We're wondering if you could tell us a bit about the process on how the podcast is written, to kind of dive into the behind the scenes of that.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much. And again, like you could do like a whole episode on just like each subsection. But, you know, fortunately with this podcast, like there's so many good people to interview, and it makes it like easy to find. It all depends on the guest. Some people reach out to us. Nicole, actually, I should say big shout out to Nicole, because Nicole is very good at helping round up people, because she's like a people person and just everyone loves her. So it's like first about finding a guest. I try my best it would be very easy for me to just like focus on food safety because there's so many people. So it's just like trying to look at what jobs we've covered and like who can we exemplify, or like what is really inspiring. And then really it's just reaching out. A lot of times it's LinkedIn, and we say this on like every episode, like use LinkedIn, that's the advice. So reach out to them, ask them if they'd like to be on the show. And then usually some guests I need to go on like a separate call just to like prep them for it, or like send a huge email back and forth. But many of them are so good. And so what I'll do is I'll then research the guest as much as I can, either prior to reaching out or after they've reached out to me. I'll listen to any podcast I can find, stalk their LinkedIn. It's public, everyone. So remember that. And just try to find as much about them, because, you know, I really want to know where can we focus on the questions? And I'll try to think, okay, so what do the students want to listen to? What do I want to know about? How can we best like highlight them? So a lot of research on that. So once the questions are out, I send out that to the guest, and we get on the call. Usually I send out my calendar, I coordinate those types of things, get into those administration, get them ready, record the episode. And one thing I love is prior to the episodes, you guys don't hear this, I do like a little chat back and forth at the beginning and the end of the episode. Just, personal note, which is really fun. Get the episode, and then I edit it and post. So what does that look like? So that's writing an introduction, editing the introduction, fixing up the audio for it, fixing the audio for the video. I usually try to do separate audio tracks. That was another thing I learned. I will say those AI voice editors that, like, what I mean, like, to fix up the audio, they're not good. Like, they act like they're good, they're not good. So I just manually go in, I'll go through the episode, get rid of the ums, or like cut out anything that we don't need. Maybe, someone was like uncomfortable, or maybe I messed up. Usually I mess up. So I'll cut that out. So I'll go through that, and then I'll record the video introduction, edit the audio over the introduction, and then start splicing it all together, and then send it out to the team. Sid does a great job at helping to market it, get the clips out, share it on LinkedIn. There's a lot of different steps. I could definitely go in depth with that. I mean, I'd be happy to, but it's probably not the time here.
Great.
So it doesn't sound like it's that hard. It's really simple, straightforward.
Sounds very easy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I will say it actually is a lot easier than it used to be. Like before, I didn't know what I was doing, and then as you get better, you start to get a little bit, like, you can even tell when the ums are there, or like finding your personal style. So it gets better over time. But I'm not going to get into AI. That could be a whole thing. But like, there's so many of these things that boast that they're like amazing AI editors. I cannot get them to work well. Like, so what I mean by AI is just like getting rid of the ums, or like getting rid of that. Like, I don't find they're good, or like they don't really improve the audio like they act like they're going to. So I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but anyways, I prefer to listen to the episode through and like really take in the conversation, because like when you're interviewing someone, you're paying attention to them, but sometimes you're so caught up in like, how do I navigate this conversation, that sometimes it can be a little hard to like take it in yourself. So,
well, you never know. We could have someone listening to this episode that has a good idea on how to help, and we're
That's
all
true.
ears. Let us know, reach out and let us know your secrets.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Well, great. Thanks for sharing some behind the scenes. I know sometimes that's my favorite thing to listen to, is a bit of behind the scenes and how the show runs behind the curtains. So thanks for sharing a bit of that, Veronica. In celebration of this 100th episode, we actually asked our listeners to send us in some questions on socials for you, Veronica, about the podcast.
Great.
So they're not that bad. I went through them and picked out some of our best ones, so that we could jump into those. So I'll start with the first one from our audience. They said, what's the biggest challenge of hosting a podcast?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is just figuring out what to talk about. And what I mean by that is like, this person in front of you can talk about so many amazing things. It's like, if we have a food safety professional, do we want to go in depth about how they learned how to communicate properly on the show floor? Do we want to talk about their amazing journey of like how they got into food safety? Because maybe they started, like they ended up in a co-op position they never knew. So for me, it's always just like figuring out how to like get one idea, because we are only like a 1 hour conversation, and I could easily make it like a 4-parter with any other person. So it's like really figuring out what we want to hear and what we want to talk about. And that's always challenging. That's a big part where the research comes in, like trying to know about your guests as much as you can. A lot of the people, though, don't have any podcasts they've ever been on. They've never done a video interview, and some of them barely have a LinkedIn profile that they've commented on, but they're like really regarded well in their industry. And like, that's a big thing I've noticed, like plant managers, like they don't post on LinkedIn because they've like, there's such good word of mouth, and like their actions stand out more. And I bet you could even attest to this, Nicole, as being like a recruiter. Like, how do you figure out this person's good?
Well, and the thing is, their job is active on the factory floor, the plant floor. So they're not sat behind a desk all day on a computer looking at on LinkedIn. As a recruiter, that's what I spend most of my day doing. But they're not there. So exactly to your point. And not everyone is a public speaker. Not everyone has been asked to be front and center on a podcast or on a mentorship session or something like that. Yet they have so much good information to share. And I think what you do so well is make people feel at ease, and it's just a conversation, and there's no right or wrong way to deliver information. It's just deliver the information, have the genuine discussion. And I know you do the same with our campus ambassadors. With some of them have said, oh, I don't want to blog, I'm not a writer. I've never done any sort of written information before. And it's like, just write what's in your heart and your experience. And, those are that information is what genuinely appeals to people. It's real and honest. And so I think as long as you're always true, which is what you get the best out of our guests that way, because of your nature, and you're just having a conversation. So
yeah, it's the hardest part, just trying to get that conversation down into an hour, because it's like I want to ask you about everything. So yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So now our next question that we had sent in was were there any surprising lessons or insights you've gained from any of the professionals that you've had featured on the show?
Ooh, that's hard. This is why I send questions ahead of time. You're surprising me on the spot. I don't know why I'm blanking with this. I guess what's been surprising to me is just how many different avenues there are. Like, I kind of knew it, but it still surprises me that some people, how they're able to maneuver within a company. Like, I've kind of been under the notation, like, growing up that, get a good job, go to university, and, like, that is the way to get, like, a high, good paying job, or, like, how to find something you love. But what I realize is that that's not the path for everyone, and that's totally fine, but that doesn't mean that you can't move up in a company. Like, there's a lot of people who started off on, like, the shop floor, and now they're, like, the head of food safety, or they're the head of operations, or they started out as a meat cutter, and then now they're a supply chain manager. Like, that still surprises me. Like, I'm doing my PhD because, like, I love knowledge and learning. I know it would help me in my career, but this podcast has made me realize that your job title, like, your education, although important, isn't always necessarily everything. Yes, of course, there's some jobs, like some research technical jobs, you do need that education, but sometimes you can, like, move up, and that really surprises me. Again, like, you're always told you got to go to school and get a good job, but there's other avenues, and I think that has made me actually feel more comforted. Yes, I joke around that I'm gonna, like, this is the end of my PhD. I don't seriously mean it, but sometimes I'm like, you know what, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing. Like, I could go find a job, I could go find and grow in this industry, and I would be okay. And that's kind of comforting in itself.
I just want to piggyback on that. I think that's one of the misconceptions. People hear food and they think food service, minimum wage, those types of salaries. And I can't share enough how wrong that is. You get, into the food industry, you can have that full-time permanent position with benefits. There are salaries at the management level, 80, 90,000 base salary, bonuses. But I work with individuals at that more senior level, the directors, the senior directors, the VPs that are making over 200 on a base. I mean, we're talking really, really good salaries, and they do exist in this industry. You have to put some time in. It's not like it doesn't happen tomorrow. As soon as you graduate, I'm going to graduate and make 100, K a year. But you have it's at your fingertips. If you want to put some time in and grow in this industry, you absolutely can. So 100% correct, Veronica, on that.
Yeah, it's been a little comforting for myself, because I can get really stressed. Like, you're very, what if things all go wrong and all that? And then you're like, maybe there's other options. And that learning about other people helps you realize that, like, it's easy to get siloed, even if you go in your own, like, I'm in a chemistry program and that's all you hear about. And you're like, well, if I fail this class, that's the end. Like, to hear that, no, people zig and zag all the time. It's,
oh yeah, you're not a tree. I have people that say, I'm 40, I'm 45, 50, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. People, don't have it all figured out forever. I think that's the number one advice I always give new grads. You don't have to have it figured out. Maybe have a plan for the next 3 to 5, but an idea. But even that, don't worry. If something great comes up, take it. Move around. There's no reason not to explore different opportunities, and the food industry definitely offers that diversity.
Well, that's some great advice. I'm sure that provided a lot of comfort for some of our listeners as well, not just for you, Veronica. So thank you for that.
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay, our next one. Yeah. So our next question is, how do you prepare for interviews? They're wondering, I know you sort of touched on research and looking, but they're wondering if you've got any rituals or anything that you do for yourself, like practice in the mirror.
No, I mean, I actually have never done that. Like Nicole said, it's a conversation. I feel if I have the questions, that's great. But sometimes I even go off script depending on like what the person's saying, because sometimes like I'll be honest, I usually have like 15 questions. I know for a fact I'm not getting through all of them. Like I'm not. So it's like following along. I don't really have rituals. If anyone's watched the podcast, you might see that like my background changes a lot, and I kind of have to move on the fly because sometimes I'm running an experiment. I'm trying to find a location in the school. So I don't have a ritual. I guess just listening, trying to take it in. I wish I had a ritual, but I think it keeps things fun on the fly.
I think one of the art forms that you've honed is listening on a podcast, because I think it really shows when you aren't really listening to the conversation and you're just getting through a set of questions. Whereas I definitely think that you do a great job of listening. And if the conversation goes in this direction, even though your questions are over here, you just don't flow. And I think that's the art of a good podcast.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to like push someone along, because I have had some people where it's like, so how did you get here? I did this and this. Okay. Like, I'm listening. You want to keep going? So sometimes that does happen. But yeah, that's a really good point, Nicole, is just listening. Like, I guess that's really my ritual, is at least, even though with all my craziness, I do make sure that I'm in like a closed space, like I can be focused on the individual, and listening takes you far. Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. And our next question is, what's your favorite part about hosting the podcast?
Meeting all the great people. That is an easy one. Like, I've learned so much. I get more out of the podcast than I could have ever imagined, and the connections and the people, and just, it's fun. Like, I can have a really bad day. I have a podcast episode, boom, I'm done. I'm like, I just talked to a really great person. Like, I'm like, how did I just speak with like the head of product development at PepsiCo? Like, this is amazing. And there's just like so many cool stories about how they are. And I just love hearing people get so excited about what they're talking about. So yeah, easy. The people, like, there's no doubt.
Okay. This is our last question that we have from our listeners. And I think this is a really good one. And I think, Veronica, you could touch on it. And then maybe Nicole, if you've got any advice too. But it's, what advice would you give to anyone starting out in podcasting or wanting to make an impact in their field?
Ooh, I feel like that's like 2 different questions. Well, for the first one with the podcast, just go for it. Like, I think try to, get a checklist. Actually, I do checklists. That is a ritual I do have. I do have a checklist to make sure everything's there. But just make sure that you care about the guests. Like, I think with, if you're doing an interview style podcast, research the guest. Like, that's my biggest piece of advice, because sometimes you can get an insight from something else. There's so many great episodes, and look outside of your realm as well. Like, I recently went to Fan Expo, and I was listening to Victor Lucas, who was the host of the Electric Playground. It was a Canadian video game show that like covered all this crazy stuff, and I got so inspired by him. And listening to him, he's video games. He has nothing to do with like food industry, But hearing him talk, I just got like so inspired by him, and like he loves the video game industry, and hearing how he asks those questions, that really inspired me. And I'm like, I want to make a podcast like him because he just cares so much and he knows so many people. So listen to different types of podcasts. Don't just listen to in your niche. Listen to video game podcasts. I listen to food podcasts. I listen to the Diary of a CEO. Like, I'm all over the place, but I think it's good to see different styles, and don't be afraid to evolve with them. Try something new. If you don't like it, it's one episode, then go to the next one and just be like, I don't like that. In terms of advice to go into the food industry, use LinkedIn. That's kind of been it's probably one of the most common pieces of advice I get on the podcast, but there's a good reason. LinkedIn is a different type of platform. I don't use other social media really, and I think, again, Nicole and Sid will know about this by the way I talk about it. I go on LinkedIn because I like that there's a face with the person, and you can get some weird stuff on LinkedIn, but when you get into the food industry, I find like you get to learn about all the people that are there, and it's really inspiring, and a lot of people are very open to talk. So yeah, I would say make a good LinkedIn profile and use it. Even if you just comment on people's stuff, you get noticed more surprisingly than you'd think. So yeah. Nicole?
Yeah, I always have something to say. So yes, I would say, and this is probably true with anything, what I've learned in life, if you're doing it for the money, I'm going to do a podcast because I get to work from home and I get to dictate my hours, and it's really cool. These people, I see them doing it, and they're getting sponsorship and they're making all this money, and I would say that's the fastest way to feel hollow and disappointed, and it won't go the way you plan. If you do anything for the money alone, it 9 times out of 10 won't work out. If you're passionate about something, and Veronica, you mentioned it, but the guy that does the video game podcast, his is successful because he's passionate, and people are very astute. They know when there's BS there, and they know when it's real and genuine. And there's so much content out there that if you don't truly care about what you're talking about, or the industry, or the people that you're talking to, and it's very noticeable that it's just self-serving, it won't be successful. I mean, maybe in a hot minute you might do something crazy online. I think some fear, outrage, conspiracy theories, all these types of things on social sells, and you might get a hot minute of success, but long term and happiness, and long term and feeling good and passionate, you need to care about what you're talking about, which is why I think, Veronica, you do such a good job with this podcast, because you are a PhD student in food. You're a food scientist. You are doing this. You're living. You're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So I think that's the number one thing I would say is you have to feel passionate, and to piggyback on what you said, LinkedIn is the place to be. You're told at school you have to have a LinkedIn profile. I would say though, to find an organization that supports you throughout your career. If you're talking a food industry alone, definitely sign up to the FoodGrads newsletter. We do connect you with our major job boards in agriculture and food, as well as Gallace, which is the search. So when you're more further ahead in your careers for that 5+ years, you then are. We can share with you those jobs that we talked about with the real money, the big money comes into play. So find an organization that you're comfortable with, that a sense of community, and I really feel proud that FoodGrads offers that. We do partner with government funded initiatives as well, like Careers Now. So we're doing all we can to support people to start their career in the food industry. But I agree, LinkedIn is the place. You can't not be there. Everyone's there, so you can't not be there. But definitely, there are other resources at your fingertips as well.
It's so funny you say about the content thing, Nicole, because that is exactly what he was talking about in the panel that we went to. He's like, I don't want to treat people as a content and as a sound bit. He's like, I know it gets the views and it can be, but that's not what I want to do. Like, it's about the people behind who make, again, I know we talk about video games. He's like, the people behind it. Like, that's what I want to focus on. You know how to play a video game. I want to talk about the person who was behind it. So yeah, it's funny that you say that.
I think it's about having integrity as well as a business, as a human, but as a business. There's so much noise online, and you can get disheartened. Especially Sydney, you manage our socials. And it's like, why hasn't this got more likes? Why isn't this shared more? Well, we could do something shocking, we never would. But the reality is the algorithms are set up for engagement, and engagement happens when people are interested or see other people interested. So when something's got a lot of reshares or likes, it's like human nature, what's going on over here. And the algorithms truly are set up for fear, outrage, conspiracy theories, all these things that we won't dabble in. That's not our business. So we have to also remind ourselves that, we are up against all this noise on social and in the digital world, but we'll stay true to who we are and we have integrity, we have morals, and we're not going to go there and do silly things just to get views and likes. I think none of our team members are interested in anything like that. And I would never, I just won't even go down that road. I think you have to be true to yourself.
What about you, Sydney? Do you have any advice?
I'm not sure. I can just talk about, it's kind of related, sort of not related, but I think that just putting yourself out there and just kind of figuring out what you like and where you can fit in. Like, I never knew that I would end up in the food and beverage industry when I went to school. I just come from a public relations background, but nothing in particular was I focusing on. And then I ended up getting my first co-op here, and then I just found out that I was passionate about it, because it can be frustrating to know that there's so many people like me 3 years ago that didn't know about all the careers and food and beverage and just how important it is and just all the different career avenues. And I just think just test the waters and see what you like and see how you can get out there, and you just never know where you'll end up making it. So yeah,
I like that. I mean, I didn't think I'd be doing a podcast when I started my co-op anytime. Honestly, I just never thought I'd start a podcast. Like, let's be real, or even get as involved in FoodGrads as I am. Like, I didn't think like I'm like going to do science. And so it's funny. Just, I think you're right, Sydney. Like, be open to opportunities, because you never know where they're going to take you. Like, honestly, I never thought when I responded back to Nicole, like, honestly, Nicole, I was like, I need something from a resume. I need something for a resume. Like, let's but
be
then,
honest.
yeah, but I mean, very quickly soon, once I met you, I was like, no, I really like this person. I'm going to stick with her because she's really inspiring. And like, it's not very often you have so many, a person in your life that's such a cheerleader. And I think that's what you bring to the team is, you're so optimistic and you're a cheerleader and like, you can do this. And you're like, Nicole, this is a little too big of a jump for me to do. You're like, no, you got this. So it's nice having, it's nice to have someone in my camp. So.
Nicole's the biggest cheerleader.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's, I think anyone would realize, and that's why I've stayed. I think, Nicole, I've almost known you for like 10 years now.
Yeah, crazy. Time flies. Well, and I'm way older than both of you, and I can honestly say that sometimes, and I know this sounds a bit out there, but I do think the universe has a plan for us. And I think that, I said at the beginning, the people that you're meant to work with, the people that come in and out of your life are there for the season that you're in and for what you're doing and trying to achieve. And I couldn't be more grateful for the team I'm in and where I'm at personally in my career. To be able to give back to the industry and to work with amazing people like you, Veronica and Sydney and our co-op students. I mean, it's just such a privilege to hopefully inspire. I mean, it's so sweet that you say I'm a cheerleader. I feel the positivity from everyone around us as well, and it keeps you motivated. I mean, there is so much negativity in the world, and if we can't carve out a little space of positivity and have fun things to work on, I mean, I think work should be fun. It's not always fun. There are tasks that aren't always fun, but if you don't have that broader vision of something bigger than yourself, what's the point? And I do. I think we've carved ourselves out a little niche here.
I think if someone's listening to my podcast enough, you're going to realize that I always seem to go, well, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and we are coming to the end of our little celebration ceremony, I guess you could say. And it's been really nice for me to look back on everything and, actually have a conversation with the team and just think about where we've all come from and seeing about the people who have come and gone. And I have to say thank you, everyone who has listened to the podcast. I know we talk about the amazing guests, we talk about the amazing people in the industry, and like I'm so excited for the next chapter of the FoodGrads podcast, which is That's a Food Job. And I'm going to have to remember how to say that because I'm so used to saying the FoodGrads podcast. But I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank everyone who has listened to an episode, downloaded. I know a lot of people might not comment and share, but I know that the numbers are there. So people are obviously listening. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. And it's thanks to you that it's possible. And I never thought that I'd be able to do this. It's helped me in my own graduate studies. It's helped me out in life. I'm a lot more confident because of the podcast. I can go up to people and talk a lot easier. Even in personal conversations, I'm able to better ask questions, which has been a really nice plus. But I'm just appreciative to everyone who's been involved, to Alyssa, Wesley, Quentin, Courtney. There's been so many people. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone who's been involved on the graphic side at the FoodGrads team. Sydney, thank you. Nicole, Paula, anyone else that is on the team and our sponsors. Just there's been so much great positivity, but as well, every single guest who has come on the show. I'm really fortunate to be able to do this, and I'm just really grateful. And yeah, I'm really excited for That's a Food Job. It's going to be a really, really fun time. It's going to come back even better than before. And we're going to keep going. We're going to celebrate the industry like one episode at a time. And we're going to, let's do the slogan. There's something for everyone in food, and we're going to help you find it. So thank you everyone so much for listening. I'm kind of taking this away from Sydney, but thank you so much for coming on the show, Sydney. Thank you, Nicole. This is my ritual. There we go, everyone. So thank you, too, for coming on the show and being a great support with it. I couldn't do it without you, and I couldn't do it without everyone listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with it, for being our fearless leader with regards to the podcast. It's your dedication that's got us to this 100th episode. And I know we'll do 100 more and 200, and we'll be celebrating continuously. And I definitely think we should sit together and have this conversation and look at the past, because it's not often you get the chance to reflect. We're always so focused on what's next. And I don't think we take enough time to look at where we've come from to today. And that really is important to see, the growth. So proud of you too so much. And thank you.
Yeah, so I guess with that, as I don't know if this is going to be the new part in the That's a Food Job, but as I always sign up, thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.